The Cabal of Tsakata, Episode 5. Julius 11th, 5:13. We only just arrived in Bubesh, and just like the last time I was here, it was far too late to call upon Samira. During the trip, Hamal was not one for conversation. As such, my days and nights were excessively quiet. In the long stretch of solitude, I gave a lot of thought to the stories revealed from the art, as well as from the scrolls and the map. The Cabal of Tsakata was simply a small but dedicated order of religious followers who simply wanted to pursue enlightenment through unrestricted and uninhibited sensuality and self-love. From the sounds of it, the Cabal didn't hurt anyone, so it was unfortunate the ancient Saushia Damite culture couldn't leave them alone. Tomorrow will be an exciting day. Not only do I get to give the letters to the director of the museum, but I get to see Samira again. Julius 12th, 5:13. It was a great day indeed. I went to the museum and saw my friend Samira, who visually lit up when we locked eye contact. In fact, we hugged one another. It was a nice surprise, and she has a lovely embrace. I explained to her all the wonderful things we found, and told her that I needed to give a letter to the director of the museum. Samira introduced me to the man, to a very friendly individual named Tovokia El-Assad. Director El-Assad greeted me with a tight hug, and he expressed gratitude over the art contributions I had given to Samira. He told me that they were recreating the art and putting them on larger canvases for museum patrons to see. Director El-Assad informed me that I was going to be credited as co-contributor, along with Dr. Reaver. The director had a light lavender-colored headscarf, with a large, thick mustache and a small nose. I gave the letter to Director El-Assad and explained that Dr. Reaver was ready to have assistance in transporting the new artifacts from the temple to the museum. As soon as I revealed that piece of news, both Samira and Dr. El-Assad smiled broadly. Their excitement was quite infectious. When I pulled out the second art book, the director squealed like a child. They both were silent as I gave them a quick preview of my sketches, and they listened with rapt attention as I described what was found. Director El-Assad requested to borrow my art book, and I was honest with him. I expressed that I had hoped to show it to Samira first in detail, as she had helped me discover the secret passage. Samira smiled broadly, which I will admit made me feel quite floaty. She promised Director El-Assad she would give him the art book as soon as she was done with it. I also mentioned that I was in Bubesh with Hamal to gather supplies, so we could return to the site soon. Director El-Assad told me that when we were ready to leave, he would arrange a company of soldiers to come along with us to help escort all of the treasure and artifacts back to Bubesh. When Samira asked to accompany us, my heart danced in my chest. Thank the goddess that Director El-Assad agreed to her request. That night, Samira and I spent most of the night talking about the secret passage and looking at the art. When I regaled her with the story of how the passage was found, she smiled broadly. She gestured to the map in my sketchbook, and she began telling me about the various places shown on the map. Samira identified the sites of the ancient cities and told me which ones still existed. One city closest to the intact temple to the northeast was Rock Lola. I began blushing as Samira started looking at the statue of Tsakata. She took great delight in my nervousness, and even called it adorable. She complimented me on my level of detail, too. We began discussing Tsakata herself. I remarked that it was interesting how ancient people depicted her, being beautiful and four-armed. Samira seemed to revel in my question, and we began suggesting humorous and possible origin stories of how the first worshippers found out about Tsakata. We parted ways at the end of the night, and she thanked me for helping the museum in such a way, and for being her friend. A small throb smacked me in the heart, but I hid it from her. I told her I was also happy, being her friend as well. I can't wait to take this trip with her. July 15th, 5:13. So we left Bubesh, accompanied by a full company of Naquerian soldiers. They deferred to Hamal, and it was the first time I had ever seen the man smile. In addition to the food, water, and other supplies, there were 3 empty wagons and 2 additional wagons for soldiers' food and supplies. Samira and I rode together, and we talked about what we saw, about what led Samira to working at the museum, and what got me into archaeology initially. Whenever I'm with Samira, the world seems to be more crisp and delightful. I really enjoy her company. She is intelligent, funny, and strikingly beautiful. However, the last thing I want to do is ruin things by blurring the lines of friendship and stepping farther than what she is willing to venture. I must keep these feelings in check. July 18th, 5:13. We arrived back in Ornac. It's nearing sunset, and yet we managed to get back before dark. Dr. Reaver welcomed Samira and the others and decided to give them a tour. I went to my tent instead, as I am quite weary from the travels. And I've already seen so much of the temple since I first arrived. After I finish this entry, I'm going to bed. July 19th, 5:13. Today was a unique day, and I got to see a different side of Samira. The one where she was a confidant liaison, working with an Aquarian government. While laborers loaded up the wagons with the treasure, she and Dr. Reaver negotiated the terms of Dr. Reaver being the lead archaeologist for some of the other temple sites. Other laborers are starting to break down the tents and collect the tools that we had been using. I've been helping where I could, but I've also been sketching landscapes and scenes where I saw them. Samira and I ate our dinner together, and we talked about what the Naquerian government will do with the temple. Half of the company of soldiers who accompanied us will remain behind and garrison Ornac. The temple is going to be treated as a historical and cultural site. Eventually, a fort will be built here to better protect the area, as well as create a stop for caravans to travel through. The museum will also set up someone to be the caretaker of the temple, too. I'm so glad that this place is going to be looked after instead of forgotten. July 20th, 5:13. The laborers have managed to carefully get the golden statue of Tsakata out of the temple and load it onto one of the wagons. It will be displayed at the museum in a place of honor. The camp has been packed up, and half of the company of soldiers have settled into where the excavation team used to be. It seems that we are going to be leaving this place tomorrow. While I've not been here as long as the others, I will be slightly sad to be parted from it. I really hope that we can get back to Bubesh safely. July 26th, 5:13. It took a little longer to get back to Bubesh because another sandstorm hit us while we were traveling. After talking briefly with Dr. Reaver, I found out that we will be in Bubesh for at least a month, while they prepare an exhibit to showcase the artifacts to the public. Until we get approved to search for Lorbesh, we are pretty much stuck in the city. Samira told me that she would be very busy for the next week, so we wouldn't be able to see each other for a while. And I said I understood. We stored the statue and the new artifacts in one of the museum's lower vaults. I'm currently in my room at the inn at the moment. It's time for a long rest. August 4th, 5:13. Since last I've written, I've spent much of my time alone. I've not seen Obasi or Carol since we first arrived, but it's understandable. They were quite sad upon our return, and I heard them have hushed conversations about their friend Norris. Dr. Reaver has been having several meetings with Director El Assad and other important Naquerian government officials. I really hope she can get the approval to find the other temple sites. It would be exciting to see where else this journey leads. I have not seen Samira, and I've steered clear of the museum to not get in anyone's way. In my solitude, I spent my time wandering the safe places of Bubesh. I drew a lot of common everyday scenes in the city in hopes to capture the real-life stories through my own art. The Naquerians are a hard and driven people, and they have managed to carve out a life for themselves from the scarcity of the desert. This country is very different from my home in Ocean Dare, and it makes me appreciate the unique qualities of my home that much more. I have seen special exhibits at museums back home, but I've never been an active contributor to one before. This is quite exciting, and I am quite blessed that I chose this career path. August 6th, 5:13. Dr. Reaver met me today and told me about what to expect from the exhibit debut. It's supposed to be a formal event where we are to dress up, attend, and prepare to answer questions related to the artifacts we found. She expressed that the people would probably swarm me with questions about the art. The exhibition would be 2 days from now. After I met Dr. Reaver, I decided to try and see Samira. I picked up some delicious food in case she had not eaten yet, and then I went to her office. When I came upon her, she was sitting over a stack of papers and scrolls, a stressed expression on her face. To my relief, Samira smiled when she saw me. Her delight blossomed further when I gave her food. I sat with Samira and asked how she was doing. Ever since she had gotten back, she had been sending out invitations for the upcoming exhibition, processing all of the artifacts, working with government appraisers, and signing off on payment to Dr. Reaver for all of the acquired treasure. Samira revealed to me that I should get a bonus from Dr. Reaver, as she often asked for such things for her junior archaeologists. Samira asked me if I was excited for the exhibition, and I indicated that I was. I also told her it was my first exhibition too. Samira advised me that patrons would most likely want to ask me lots of questions related to the art, so I should prepare myself. For many modern-day Naquerians, they did not know Tsakata even existed. Or if they knew of her, they had the assumption that she was a demoness. The art I had helped discover would be fascinating indeed. Samira suggested that the younger generations would be the most interested, as today's youth were trying to wriggle out from underneath the weight of their parents' conservative ways. A sudden nervousness flared up inside me. Something had been on my mind all morning, and now was the moment that it would either be born or it would die. I took a deep breath, and then I asked if Samira was going to be in attendance. Samira replied she had to go, although she would have wanted to be there anyway, so yes. I took a chance, and then asked her if she wanted to go to the exhibit with me, even though we were both required to be there. There was a short, awkward moment that lingered between us, but we looked into one another's eyes. She asked me, quite seriously, if I were asking her to escort me to the exhibit as a companion for the evening. My throat went dry and my words creaked out past my lips. I said that I wanted to escort her to the exhibit and be her companion for the night, if she would have me. There was another dreadfully long bout of quiet before she said, "I would love for you to escort me." I felt myself smile broadly, which caused her to smile too. She touched my hand and told me she found me quite charming. I told her I found her beautiful and fascinating. We changed the subject, but we were both quite red-faced and goofy. We parted ways and I went back to my room. I can't wait for the exhibit. August 8th, 5:13. The exhibition was today, and it started off pretty well, although the ending was quite upsetting. Let me start at the beginning. Samira met me at my room, and by the goddess, she looked lovely. She wore a light blue silk dress and a matching headscarf. I wore a set of fine clothing from Ocean Dare, a set of slacks, a buttoned-up shirt, and a long coat, but I still wore a headscarf. Samira complimented me on my attire, and I felt immensely handsome and princely. We went to the museum, and I was taken aback by how many well-dressed people were there. A torrent of anxiety swept over me, but I gained my peace when Samira grabbed my arm and tenderly held it close to her. We walked inside, and Samira had to go check in with the other museum staff, but she told me she would find me later. As we parted ways, we held hands for a second, and I felt my blood race through my veins. I found my way over to Dr. Reaver, and Dobasi and Carol were with her. All three of them were dressed in Oceandarian formal attire, with headscarves. We were eventually joined by Dr. El Assad, and he led us to where we were supposed to stand to answer questions. Before the actual exhibit began, we were allowed to see the new additions to the museum. Samira joined me, and we walked arm in arm. Dr. Reaver, Carol, and Dobasi noticed it, and they all beamed smiles at me. The golden statue was the grand jewel of the exhibit, and it was where most of the patrons would fixate on. My eyes trailed over the golden form of the goddess. I blushed a little, which elicited a humorous giggle from Samira. Another section was dedicated to the various trinkets, treasures, and religious tools of the Cabal. That would be where Carol would be standing. A third section was dedicated to the piles of scrolls found. Obasi was going to be there. Lastly, Samira and I came to my section. I was blown away by what I saw. The art sketches I had given to Samira and the museum had been enlarged and recreated to be displayed on large banners. It was marvelous to see the images from the Temple of Tsakata at Ornac shown for the patrons to see. There was a small plaque beside one of the art pieces that explained I was the artist who drew the sketches, and that Dr. Reaver and I were both co-contributors. I was not surprised when I did not see the map shown to the public. Samira explained to me that until both sites were found and excavated, they are to remain state secrets. When the exhibit started, Samira stayed with me for most of the night, or rather around me. It was such a nice experience, because she was always in sight. The dress hugged her curves quite nicely, and I couldn't help but admire the beauty of her body. Well-dressed nobles and other important Naquerians filtered into the exhibit hall. Dr. Reaver stood at the front, and she and Director El Assad greeted people as they entered. As I anticipated, most of the people were drawn to the golden statue. Hamal, Isco, and a couple of other armed soldiers stood beside the statue and prevented people from touching it. I couldn't help but notice how often people stared at the erect penis of the statue, or her bosoms with wide eyes. In Aquarian culture, everything was so conservative and censored, so to see such brazen nudity and sensuality, well, their reactions were quite expected. For the most part, many of the patrons were overloaded by the raw confidence of Tsakata, that few people asked questions to Carol, Obasi, or myself. There were some questions, though. As I was the last part of the exhibit, people congregated toward my section, as the art was so graphic, especially the images inside the orgy rooms. Couples stood gazing at them, and I could see the wheels of their imaginations spinning. Samira whispered into my ear that many would no doubt try the things they saw tonight. A deep longing flickered in my heart, but I said nothing. I only nodded. She must have sniffed out my innermost thoughts because she squeezed my arm against herself, and she raked her nails against my back. There had to have been over 100 people who attended the exhibit tonight. I got the chance to meet the city governor, the regional governor, and even the Naquerian princess. The country's prime minister could not attend tonight. It was tense when I saw the Tagunite clergy come in masse, and they glared at all of the art and the statue. They even said to Samira that Tagun was disappointed in her and the museum. To my admiration, Samira said that she was sorry the clerics felt that way. She didn't denounce them or even reveal that she was not a believer. Doing so would no doubt cause many issues for her, and I adored that she kept a cool head. None of the Tagunite clerics looked at me, Carol, or Obasi, but they cursed Dr. Reaver for unearthing such perversions. The rest of the night was fairly eventful, as I greeted and answered questions of those who were brave enough to not be drowned by their awakened sensual awareness. Once we were finished, Dr. Reaver told me she would give us a bonus, and mine would be sent back to the university back in Ocean Dare. We would be given credit, as well as spending money in addition to the bonus. Until we were given permission to go to the next temple, we were to enjoy the hospitalities of Bubesh. I asked Samira if I could walk her home safely, and she said yes. The walk from the museum was quiet, and we held hands as we strolled. Samira's hands were soft, and her fingers gripped me fiercely. When we got to her home, I turned to go, but she stopped me. There was an insistence in her eyes, and she stepped forward to kiss me. I eagerly kissed back, and I pulled her close. For a long moment, our lips pressed together, but then they parted. I gazed into her eyes, and she into mine. And then tears saturated her eyes. She stepped away and said, "I'm sorry, I can't do this," and then ran inside. She slammed the door behind her. I stood there for nearly a minute, not certain what had just happened. Tears filled my own eyes, and I began the long trek back to my room. Why? Why did this happen? Was it me? Was it because I did something wrong? Maybe I pushed her into this, and she felt obligated to go on a date with me. Considering that we just came from a Tsakata exhibit, perhaps we were both feeling supercharged and filled with lusty excitement. I began to feel quite bad, for I became convinced I made my friend uncomfortable. I wish I would not have pushed her into this date. I hope she can forgive me one day.